The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. A little black boy, no more than 9 years old, stood up from the wooden bench, hands shaking slightly but voice steady as a mountain. "I'm my mom's lawyer." Gasps echoed. The judge blinked in confusion. The prosecuting attorney smirked, thinking it was a joke. But Isaiah wasn't laughing. He clutched a stack of handwritten notes in one hand and a well-worn law book in the other. Every eye in the room turned to him. The bailiff moved forward, unsure what to do. But the judge, intrigued and clearly curious, raised his hand. "Let the boy speak." And in that moment, everything began to change. Welcome back to Twilight Tales, where unbelievable, heartwarming, and thought-provoking stories come to life. If you're visiting for the first time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because we bring you the kinds of stories that inspire, challenge stereotypes, and restore your faith in humanity. Let me ask you something. What would you do if the one person who believed in you most was taken away, and you were the only one who could save them? Today's story is about one brave little boy who refused to sit down and watch injustice win. When Isaiah's mom, Tamika, was wrongfully accused of neglect and dragged into a courtroom battle, the system expected her to crumble. She was poor, single, black, and up against lawyers who only cared about winning. But Isaiah? He had something none of them expected: courage, intelligence, and a love for his mother so powerful, it gave him the strength to step into a courtroom not as a child, but as a defender. What happened inside that courtroom will make your heart race, bring tears to your eyes, and make you believe in miracles born of determination. This isn't just a story about a courtroom twist. It's a story about family, truth, and the incredible power of a child's mind and heart when pushed to the edge. So grab a seat, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Before the courtroom drama that would capture headlines, there was just Isaiah and his mom, Tamika. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet, overlooked corner of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was filled with love. The walls were covered with Isaiah's school drawings, rockets, superheroes, and pictures of him holding his mom's hand. The fridge always had peanut butter, and bedtime came with stories Tamika made up on the spot. Tamika worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices by night and stocking shelves at the local supermarket during the day. Even though she was always tired, she never let Isaiah see her weariness. For her, he was everything. Her sunshine in a world that rarely gave her light. Isaiah was no ordinary kid. He was a quiet observer, one of those children who noticed things most adults missed. While other kids played video games or watched cartoons, Isaiah would sit beside his mom while she read bills, filled out forms, or watched courtroom dramas late at night. "Why does that man get to decide everything?" he once asked her, watching a judge slam his gavel on TV. "Because he studied hard, baby," Tamika replied. "He learned the law." Isaiah's eyes widened. "Can I learn the law too?" She smiled, ruffling his curls. "You can learn anything. Especially that." From that day forward, Isaiah was obsessed with law books. Tamika brought home old encyclopedias from thrift shops and borrowed courtroom novels from the library. She even downloaded a few legal PDFs on her old cracked phone for him to read. He'd read aloud to her at night. "The Constitution protects the rights of all citizens." "Even me?" he'd ask. "Especially you," she'd say. They were a team. They laughed at bad TV lawyers, made up fake cases for fun, and argued playfully about who left the cereal out. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And it worked. But things began to unravel the day Tamika's second job cut her hours. Bills piled up. Late notices arrived in red ink. And one cold afternoon, after leaving Isaiah with a neighbor and walking to the store to cash her final paycheck, Tamika came back to a nightmare. Police cars lined the street. A social worker stood on her porch. Isaiah was nowhere in sight. Tamika's heart pounded as she raced up the sidewalk. The flashing red and blue lights painted the front of her building like a crime scene. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. One woman whispered to another on the stoop, "That's her, the mother." Tamika ignored them, pushing past the social worker's outstretched hand. "Where's my son? Where's Isaiah?" A stern-looking officer blocked her. "Ma'am, step back." "I live here," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. "Where is my child?" The social worker stepped in. Her badge read Miss Keaton, and her clipboard was covered in notes already. "Isaiah has been placed in temporary protective custody. We received a call about potential neglect." Tamika's world stopped spinning. "What? I just stepped out for 20 minutes. My neighbor watches him all the time. Ask her, ask anyone." But the officer spoke again. "Ma'am, we also received reports that your apartment had no heat, no groceries, and that your child hadn't been attending school regularly. Tamika's eyes filled with tears. That's not true. He's homeschooled, look at the books. And the heat's been broken for 2 days, but I reported it to the landlord. None of it seemed to matter. Her words felt invisible, bouncing off bureaucratic walls. Before she knew it, Tamika was in handcuffs, her rights being read aloud like some cruel joke. She screamed for Isaiah. Her voice echoed down the block, but her son was already gone, swept into a system that didn't care about context, only control. Meanwhile, Isaiah sat in a sterile white room at a child protection center. A woman with a polite smile and a notepad kept asking him the same questions. Does your mom leave you alone often? Are you scared at home? Do you eat every day? He tried to answer, but they looked at him like he didn't understand the seriousness of what was happening. When he asked if he could call his mom, the woman gave a soft sigh and said, "Not right now, sweetheart." Isaiah didn't cry. He just stared at the table, replaying every conversation he'd ever had with Tamika about the law, about justice, about how sometimes the truth didn't matter unless you could prove it. That night, while lying on a thin cot in a strange foster home, Isaiah made a decision. He wouldn't wait for someone else to fix this. He would fight. Like the lawyers he had studied in books. He would become his mother's voice. Her defender. Even if no one else took him seriously. Even if it meant standing in front of a judge. Because Isaiah knew one thing for sure. His mom didn't deserve this. The next morning, Isaiah woke up early in the unfamiliar foster home. He didn't touch the breakfast pancakes the nice lady had made. His mind was elsewhere, racing with strategy, determination, and a quiet fire no adult around him could see coming. He found a pencil and a few sheets of paper and started scribbling everything he could remember. The officer's badge number, the name of the social worker, the exact time Tamika had left the house, and even the broken heater complaint number. Most 12-year-olds might have folded under the weight of fear and confusion. Not Isaiah. He was his mother's son. He remembered what Tamika had once told him during a late-night thunderstorm when the power had gone out and they were wrapped in a blanket together. "Baby," she'd said, "you don't need to be grown to stand tall. You just need to know what's right, and never be afraid to speak it." So he did. He asked the foster mother if he could use her computer to write something for school. She hesitated, then agreed. Within an hour, Isaiah had typed a 3-page document titled, "Defense of Tamika Rhodes, a Case of Misjudgment." He laid out timelines, wrote a statement of character for his mom, and even quoted laws about due process and child custody from books he had read for fun. When the social worker came to check on him the next day, Isaiah handed her the paper. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "My legal argument," Isaiah said plainly. "I want the judge to read it before the hearing." She chuckled, clearly amused. "That's sweet, Isaiah. But you can't represent anyone. You're a child." Isaiah didn't flinch. "But I can tell the truth. And I can present evidence. Isn't that what court is for?" The social worker didn't respond. She just tucked the paper into her folder. Most likely never intended to read it. But Isaiah wasn't done. That night, while pretending to sleep, he listened closely as the foster mom watched the news in the next room. A segment came on about the overreach of child protection services. A local attorney, Ms. Brenda Keller, was being interviewed about a similar case she had overturned. Isaiah's ears perked up. The next morning, when the foster mother left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter, Isaiah quietly picked it up, typed in the name Brenda Keller, family attorney, and wrote down her number on a napkin. When he was taken back to the child welfare center that afternoon for more questioning, he slipped into a side hallway and asked to use the phone to call his aunt. Instead, he called the number he'd written down. "Law Office of Brenda Keller," said a voice. "My name is Isaiah Rhodes," he said with no hesitation. "I need help. My mom was arrested for something she didn't do. I wrote a legal defense. I'm 12 but I know the truth. Please, just let her see it." The receptionist paused, then asked him to wait. A moment later, a woman's voice came on the line. "You wrote a legal defense?" she asked, intrigued. "Yes, ma'am," Isaiah said. "And I can prove my mom is innocent." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Isaiah, I'd like to meet you." That call would change everything. The courthouse was quiet that morning, the air stiff with tension. Tamika sat in her orange jumpsuit, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. She hadn't seen Isaiah since her arrest. The court-appointed lawyer barely knew her name, let alone her story. She felt like a ghost in her own life. The judge entered. A sharp rap of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Case number 12 CV 4971. The state versus Tamika Rhodes, the clerk announced. Tamika swallowed hard. The prosecutor wasted no time painting a bleak picture. A struggling single mother behind on rent, allegedly leaving her child unattended while trying to cash a check. Negligence, they claimed. Endangerment. Grounds for custody removal. Tamika's lawyer barely argued back. He mumbled through his statements, fumbling through paperwork. Then, just as the judge sighed and reached for the folder to finalize temporary custody placement, a small voice called out, "Your Honor, may I speak?" Heads turned. From the back of the room, Isaiah stood. Wearing his pressed Sunday shirt and holding a folder in his hand, he walked steadily forward, eyes locked on the bench. The bailiff stepped toward him. "You can't." But the judge raised a hand. "Let him come." Whispers rippled across the courtroom. Tamika gasped. "Isaiah." The judge looked down at the boy. "And who are you, young man?" "I'm Isaiah Rhodes. And I'm here to speak for my mom." The judge, curious and a little amused, leaned forward. "You do understand this is a court of law?" "Yes, sir," Isaiah said calmly. "And I've studied the law. I wrote a defense with timelines, character statements, and legal precedent. I gave it to the social worker, but I don't think she read it." He held up his folder. The courtroom was stunned. The judge motioned for the bailiff to retrieve the document. As the judge read through Isaiah's carefully written words, complete with references to state law, detailed notes about the arrest, and testimonies about Tamika's character, his expression slowly changed. What started as amusement shifted to surprise, then admiration. The prosecutor looked uncomfortable. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "But not irrelevant," the judge interrupted. "This boy has provided more substance in 3 pages than the defense attorney has in this entire case." Tamika's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, her son standing up not just as her boy but as her voice. Her hope. The judge looked at Isaiah again. "You believe your mother was wrongly accused?" "Yes, sir," Isaiah replied. "She didn't abandon me. She left me with a neighbor for 15 minutes. We've never gone a day without food. She works 2 jobs to keep us going. She's not dangerous. She's strong. And she loves me more than anything." Silence fell. The judge finally nodded. "This court recognizes the bravery and clarity shown here today. I will be reviewing this case thoroughly before making any decisions. Temporary custody will remain undecided until further evaluation." A sigh of relief swept through the room. Tamika, sobbing now, reached out as the bailiff led her back, whispering Isaiah's name with pride. "And Isaiah?" He stood still, his chin lifted. The boy who walked into court alone had just changed everything. What happened in that courtroom didn't stay in that courtroom. By the next morning, a court clerk had told a friend who told a cousin who shared it with a local blogger. By lunch, that blog post had gone viral. 10-year-old stuns judge by acting as his own mother's lawyer, the headline read, accompanied by a blurry photo of Isaiah standing in front of the judge, holding his folder with both hands like a shield and a sword. Then the local news picked it up. Then national. And suddenly, Isaiah wasn't just a boy from the corner apartment anymore. He was the kid who defended his mom. At first, Tamika didn't believe it. Still in custody awaiting formal review, she was sitting on a cot when a guard handed her a small newspaper. She saw Isaiah's face on the cover. Tears welled in her eyes. "That's my baby." Back in their neighborhood, things changed overnight. The supermarket where Tamika worked hung up a sign that said, "We stand with Tamika." Her co-workers organized a donation drive. Teachers from Isaiah's school posted videos sharing stories about his brilliance, his quiet kindness, how he stayed late in the library reading legal books instead of playing. Even the grumpy old man from the 3rd floor, who never spoke to anyone, offered to mow their tiny patch of lawn. But the biggest wave came from strangers. People from all walks of life. Lawyers, parents, former foster kids, social workers, started sending messages. Some wrote letters to the judge. Others offered Tamika free legal representation. A black female attorney from D.C. even flew in and said, "No mother should go through this alone. I'll take the case." Isaiah, meanwhile, was overwhelmed. He never wanted fame. He just wanted his mom back. When the media began knocking on their door, he politely declined interviews. "It's not about me," he'd say. "It's about my mom." But he couldn't avoid it completely. One afternoon, while sitting on a bench outside the courthouse, a well-dressed man in a navy suit approached him. He had a kind smile and eyes that studied Isaiah with warmth. "Are you Isaiah Rhodes?" "Yes," Isaiah replied, cautious. The man extended a hand. "I'm Judge Harmon. Retired. I saw the footage. I've been in courtrooms for 40 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did." Isaiah looked up. Did I do something wrong? No, son, the judge said with a smile. You reminded the world what justice should look like. He handed Isaiah a business card. When you're older, if you still want to pursue law, give me a call. You've got a seat waiting at Harmon Law Fellowship. Isaiah took the card in stunned silence. Tamika, released on supervised bond thanks to public pressure, hugged her son like never before that night. I knew you were smart, she whispered. But baby, you're powerful. He looked up at her. I just wanted to make sure you were heard. She cupped his face. You did. Loud and clear. That night, for the first time in weeks, they sat on their worn-out couch, ate peanut butter sandwiches, and laughed like they used to. Outside, a candlelight vigil formed beneath their window, neighbors, friends, and strangers holding signs that read, Justice for Tamika, and Let the Boy Be Heard. The system had tried to silence them. But now the whole world was listening. The courtroom looked different this time. Not because the wood panels had changed or the judge's gavel was any shinier, but because now it was packed. Reporters lined the back rows. Local leaders sat shoulder to shoulder with Tamika's co-workers. Isaiah's principal, his librarian, and even the barista from the coffee shop across the street had come to witness history. But Isaiah didn't care about any of them. His eyes were focused straight ahead, on the judge and on the truth. Tamika, no longer in a jumpsuit but in her Sunday best, stood beside her new attorney. Still, she reached out for Isaiah's hand as he sat at the family's table. He squeezed hers, whispered, We got this, Mom, and then faced the front. The prosecutor, perhaps feeling the pressure from public scrutiny, now spoke carefully, but still tried to defend the original case. Your Honor, she said, this case was based on concern for the child's safety. We believed there was reasonable suspicion. The judge interrupted, holding up a report. I've reviewed the new testimony, medical evaluations, and interviews conducted since the last hearing. And frankly, I find the original concerns to be unfounded and exaggerated. The courtroom murmured. Then it was the defense's turn. Tamika's new attorney stood up, confident and clear. Your Honor, my client has worked 2 jobs to support her child. She's maintained stable housing, provided education, care, and has never had a history of abuse. In fact, Isaiah's school records show a young man excelling in academics, self-discipline, and moral character. She paused. Isaiah even taught himself family law to defend her when no one else would. That alone speaks volumes. Then unexpectedly she stepped back. Isaiah has prepared a statement, if the court will allow it. The judge nodded. Proceed. Isaiah stood, walked slowly to the center of the courtroom and faced the bench. The silence was heavy. I'm not a real lawyer, he began. I know that. But I read the laws. I read what a parent is supposed to be. And I read what love looks like in legal words. He held up a crumpled piece of paper. My mom did everything that paper says. She gave me food, shelter, school, love, and made me feel safe every single day. Just because we're not rich or because sometimes she came home tired, doesn't mean she failed me. He looked over at Tamika. She's my hero. And I won't let anyone take her away from me. Ever. The judge stared at him for a long time. Then nodded. Thank you, Isaiah. That was one of the most powerful statements this courtroom has ever heard. He turned to face the room. This court finds no evidence of abuse or neglect. The case is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel hit the desk. 3 loud strikes that sounded like thunder, and then the room exploded in applause. Tamika dropped into her seat, tears rolling freely. Isaiah turned to hug her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like a defendant. She felt like a mother again. The judge called Isaiah back over before they left. You may not be a real lawyer yet, he said with a grin, but when you're ready, the bar will be lucky to have you. Isaiah smiled, but his eyes were on his mom. Because she was free. And nothing else mattered more. In the days following the ruling, Isaiah's story spread like wildfire. It began with a local reporter who had quietly attended the hearing, only planning a short column for the community page. But after hearing Isaiah's speech and witnessing the ruling, she scrapped her original draft and titled the article, Boy Becomes His Mother's Lawyer, and Wins. Within 48 hours, it was trending nationwide. News outlets scrambled for interviews. Talk shows, podcasts, and advocacy organizations called Tamika's home nonstop. But Tamika, still reeling from the emotional roller coaster, chose to remain quiet, at least for now. She wanted to protect Isaiah, who was still just a child, no matter how mature he'd seemed in court. Still, some waves couldn't be held back. Isaiah received a scholarship offer from a local law school that didn't even usually award to middle schoolers. A major publishing company contacted Tamika to write a memoir about her journey. The National Family Defense Coalition invited Isaiah and his mom to speak at their annual conference. Suddenly, the same system that had tried to silence their voices was holding a microphone to them. But the biggest change wasn't the attention. It was the impact. Because people, especially single mothers and their children, saw themselves in Tamika and Isaiah. Messages poured in. "My daughter and I watched your story on TV. I've been afraid to speak up, but now I feel like I can. I didn't think kids like mine could ever dream of becoming lawyers, but now my son is writing his own case notes. Thank you, Isaiah. You reminded us that we're not powerless." Isaiah began receiving letters from around the country, some handwritten by kids, others typed out by grateful parents. One note, scribbled in crayon, simply read, "You're my superhero." Back home, Isaiah tried to stay grounded. He still played with Legos. He still rode his bike through the neighborhood. But when people passed him now, they didn't just see a boy, they saw a voice. A symbol. A quiet revolution in sneakers. Tamika too had her world transformed. Her job welcomed her back with open arms. The same co-workers who once whispered behind her back now greeted her with hugs and flowers. A local business started a fund to help single parents in legal trouble, naming it the Isaiah Initiative. And then one evening, as the sun dipped low behind their small apartment building, Isaiah and Tamika sat on the porch, watching the sky turn orange. "You changed the world," she whispered to him, brushing his curls back. Isaiah looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I just wanted to bring you home." Tamika smiled, tears welling again. "You did more than that." He leaned his head on her shoulder. In that moment there were no cameras. No reporters. No crowds. Just a boy and his mother, finally free, finally heard. And though their story had reached millions, its true power wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet courage of a child who believed in his mother more than the world believed in him. And that, perhaps, was the most unforgettable victory of all. Sometimes the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They don't wear robes or badges. They don't sit behind mahogany desks. Sometimes they sit in the front row, swinging their legs nervously, clutching a stack of handwritten notes, praying the world will listen. Isaiah didn't just defend his mother. He reminded everyone, judges, lawyers, and families watching from home, that truth isn't about age or title. It's about heart. About courage. About standing up when you've got every reason to sit down. For Tamika, the courtroom was just one battle. She fought every single day for survival, for respect, and for her child's future. And when she couldn't speak for herself, Isaiah became her voice. Their story, though filled with struggle, isn't just about what happened in that courtroom. It's about what's possible when love refuses to give up. When a child sees his mother not as someone broken, but as someone worth defending at all costs. Across the country, conversations began to shift. Social workers, judges, and policymakers started reviewing the way families were separated and heard. One small boy, barely tall enough to reach the judge's bench, had sparked a fire that even the coldest systems couldn't ignore. And perhaps the greatest part of this story? Isaiah is just getting started. He still keeps his handwritten closing argument in a folder under his bed. He still helps his mom with paperwork. And he still dreams, not just of becoming a lawyer but of changing the entire system so that no child ever has to do what he did. But for now, Isaiah's legacy is already carved into the hearts of millions. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this right now, you, needed to hear this. Maybe you're a parent, struggling to be seen. Maybe you're a child, wondering if your voice matters. Or maybe you're someone who's always believed stories like this were impossible. Well, Isaiah proved otherwise. So what can we learn from a little boy in an oversized blazer, standing in front of a courtroom, trembling but unshaken? Everything. Because justice doesn't always wear a tie. Sometimes, it wears a backpack. Thank you for watching this incredible story here on Twilight Tales. If this touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We bring you stories that challenge the odds, stir the soul, and remind you what true courage looks like. Backhand index pointing right, what would you have done in Isaiah's shoes? Backhand index pointing right, have you ever stood up for someone when nobody else would? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of love. This is Twilight Tales, where every story has a soul.